Alrighty, so in the previous video we set ourselves up so where we now have the optic on top of the mount. Everything's nice and good to go, aiming centered. Now what I want to do is I want to start working on the actual reticle. Now I do have an annoying little crosshair in the way. I would like to go ahead and get rid of that. So let's go ahead and, at least in my case, I just disconnect from here so we no longer have that widget in the center. And there we go. So now we can actually see the reticle because we're going to be replacing it with a little dot. So to begin, here we have our optic. Let's go ahead and add the optic component to it. And here's where we do kind of have a little bit of a problem. So I don't know how to view the UVs of a skeletal mesh inside the editor, but I can tell you right now that these are incorrect. So I do have this material mi_set_site_socket, and that is basically just a generic helper to help you position where you want your optics to be. So for example, if I go to, let's say we'll go to the micro dot because that just has a single aim socket and a single point. So here we are. And actually this has it by default. Yeah, mi_set_site_socket. So you'll see right here we have this little, dot in the center. And it is used for positioning the aim socket. So if I move it right up in front, you can see we're positioned basically in the dead center of the socket. So I'm going to move it back where it was. But that is the purpose of it. So basically it just draws a little circle in the center of the UVs, nothing more. So what we can do is here we have this guy right here. We can't really use, because I'm setting this, as you can see, to use that site socket. We can't really use it because we would have a dot in the center, but the UVs are unwrapped in a way where it's just no bueno. Mostly probably because this actually is meant to use the glass material that is provided to look like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap it, and instead we're going to use a cylinder. So we're going to add this cylinder, which is huge. I'm going to go ahead and rotate it by 90. Let's scale it down to like 0.1, okay, 0.01, 0.03, I guess. And move it kind of in position. Okay, so that's a little big. Try 0.02. A little small. 0.025. A smidge big, but it sits in there fine. So we're going to do that. So here we have our glass. We're going to put it just in front of it, like so. So that way we see the white. Reason for that is the outside of the reticle is going to be translucent, like entirely, so you're not going to be able to see it. So that way we get the glass effect, and it doesn't affect our reticle. Now it's quite thick. It doesn't really matter, but I'm going to go ahead and just drop this guy down to really small, so it's like a disc basically, and adjust it. I want to put it right there. So back to our optic component. Let's go ahead and we'll enter the mesh name that we want to use, which in this case is cylinder. Now everything else can be default. We just need to change the reticle material. So reticle material index, that's going to be the index that we have our reticle on. So this only has one material, and that's what it's applied to. So element 0. So we know we want index 0, and here we want to add a reticle to it. So when we spawn, we'll have, whichever one we want. So in this case, we're going to do yeah, I think I labeled all mine with reticle. So we should have here's a micro dot and red dot. Which one's the red dot? Okay, so that's just the little dot there. So it's the same thing as the micro dot. It just won't be influencing it. So I want to move that to a separate window because I want to adjust the size. But that's what we're going to use. So we press play. As you can see, we now have the dot right there. So we're going to tweak it a little bit. Size-wise, I'd say that's okay. But we do want to modify the brightness some. Actually, save all because we don't really need much more of that. But we're going to come down here to the reticle brightness settings, and we want to give it some glow. So we're going to start at, say, 25. Press play, and there we can actually start to kind of see it glow some. Okay, the movement speed in this is looking. But yeah, that shows it a little bit better, I think. You can see it has kind of like the glowy effect to it, a little bit washed out, bright in the center, kind of like you would expect out of like an LED. But yeah, that's basically it. So if we want to move that by default, what I typically would replace my like the reticle materials with kind of just all together, I almost always use that set sight socket, so that way I can position it where I want. But yeah, so that's going to be right there, and we are good to go. So that's it. We now have a reticle. Yay. Okay, so let's see. I'm trying to think of what to do after. That kind of gives the gist of that. The other thing we can do is we can make this magnified. So let's see, we're only in 5 minutes. So let's make this optic magnified, I guess. So we're going to add the SKG scene capture. What did I call it? Optic scene capture component. And we need to position this in front of the optic. So that's kind of centered, I guess. Yeah, that's pretty close. Now in our optic, we're going to make sure that this matches the name of this, which it does. So we have the optic scene capture component for the optional optic scene capture component. Now we need to swap the reticle out. So in this case, we already have a pre-made one for the ATACR, or the LPVO that it comes with. But I do not remember the name clearly, so we're going to search for reticle. Nope, that ain't it. Reticle something. Yeah, ATACR reticle. Compile save. And now all of a sudden, we have ourselves a magnified optic with the eye box. So we're quite far away from the optic, so our eye box is quite small, as you can kind of tell. So we want to fix that. So what we can do is let's go to the material itself. This is where everything kind of gets handled. However, this is where we have more options. So in general, we would want to be closer if this was, a magnified optic. So we're going to fake it because, that's not what it's intended to be, but we're going to move ourselves closer to the actual optic, and we're going to asphyxiate ourselves at a specific position behind it. So for a lot of your magnified optics, I would generally recommend having this set to true, so use fixed aiming distance, and that fixes some of the problems that I have in Tarkov, where certain magnified optics on different firearms are positioned too far away to where you have this annoying eye box that you can't do anything about. So when I set that to 10 and I hit play, we are now closer to it overall. We have just a little bit of the eye box, and in my opinion, that's actually not too bad. So now let's go ahead and we'll bump up the magnification by default. So where I'm at, go to the optic, go to magnification settings. We have 1 as the default. We're just going to go ahead and make this a 2 power. And there you go. So that is now our optic. As well, you can see. So we now have a magnified optic, and you saw that took what? 45 seconds, maybe? Simple to do. But yeah, I'm getting pretty sick of doing tutorials. I've been doing them since I woke up, if you can't tell. Let's see. I don't think there's really anything else. We don't have zooming set up because we don't have the inputs, but zooming out of the box is pretty straightforward. You literally call zoom in, zoom out, that kind of thing. Same thing with the point of impact, but that'll all be covered later. So probably in the next video, we're going to start actually working on setting up some more inputs to where we can do more things. So I will see you then.